The packhouse chandelier cast fractured light across the assembled wolves, their eyes gleaming with curiosity and cruelty in equal measure. Kaya's hand trembled as she pressed it protectively over her belly, where the smallest curve had begun to show beneath her simple cotton dress. 3 months. She'd waited 3 months to tell Marcus, wanting to be certain, wanting the moment to be perfect. She'd imagined his face lighting up, his arms wrapping around her, his wolf howling with joy at the news of their heir. She hadn't imagined this. Say that again, Kaya whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. Around them, the dinner celebration continued in hushed murmurs, every pack member straining to hear their alpha's response. Marcus stood before her in all his dark-haired glory, his alpha aura radiating outward in waves that made lesser wolves bow their heads, but not Kaya. Despite the mate bond that stretched between them like a golden thread, despite the agony beginning to bloom in her chest, she kept her chin raised and her eyes locked on his. I said, Marcus repeated, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent hall, that this pregnancy is the biggest mistake of my life. The words landed like physical blows. Kaya felt her wolf whimper and curl inward, confused and wounded. This was their mate, their chosen one. The bond between them pulsed with his disgust, his resentment, emotions so strong they made her stomach turn. Marcus, I don't understand. Kaya's fingers dug into her dress, the fabric bunching beneath her desperate grip. We're mates. This is our child, our— You trapped me. Marcus cut her off, his upper lip curling in a sneer that transformed his handsome features into something ugly. Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? That convenient night when you insisted we complete the bond, when your heat came on so suddenly? Heat flooded Kaya's face. She was aware of everyone watching, listening, judging. My heat was natural. I would never. You wanted to lock me down before I could find someone better. Marcus stepped closer, and Kaya caught the scent of perfume on his collar. Not her perfume. Something floral and expensive that one of the visiting she-wolves had been wearing at last week's gathering. Someone more worthy of being an alpha's mate. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Around them, pack members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke in her defense. No one met her eyes. I've been faithful to you, Kaya said, her voice steadier now despite the tears threatening to spill. I've been a good mate. How can you? I reject you. The world stopped spinning. Kaya couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the words that had just destroyed her entire existence. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. I, Marcus Thorne, Alpha of the Shadow Creek Pack, reject you, Kaya Winters, as my mate, and Luna. His voice was formal, ritualistic, each word a knife between her ribs. I will not acknowledge this child. It is not my responsibility, not my legacy, and certainly not my joy. It is my biggest regret, and I will not let one night of weakness chain me to a life of disappointment. The mate bond began to fray, golden threads unraveling in Kaya's chest. The pain was exquisite, all-consuming, worse than anything she'd ever experienced. She gasped and doubled over, clutching her stomach as agony radiated through every nerve. Get out, Marcus said coldly, turning his back on her. You're no longer welcome in this pack. You have until dawn to leave our territory. Kaya wanted to fight, wanted to rage and scream and demand the respect she deserved. But her wolf was howling in anguish, the bond was tearing apart inside her, and she could feel the eyes of the entire pack watching her humiliation with either pity or satisfaction. She ran, through the packhouse doors, across the manicured lawn, into the forest that bordered their territory. Branches caught at her dress and scratched her arms, but she didn't slow down. Behind her, she heard laughter filtering out from the packhouse. Someone had turned the music back on. The celebration continued as if she'd never existed. The rejection completed as she reached the halfway point to the border. The final thread snapped, and Kaya collapsed to her knees with a scream that scattered birds from the trees. Her wolf retreated to the deepest part of her mind, wounded and confused. The empty space where Marcus had been in her consciousness ached like a missing limb. Kaya didn't know how long she knelt there in the dirt, arms wrapped around her middle, protecting the tiny life growing inside her. The life her mate had called a mistake, a regret. "My baby," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry he doesn't want you." But even as despair threatened to drag her under, something fierce sparked in her chest. Marcus didn't want this child. Fine. She did. She wanted this baby more than she'd ever wanted anything, and she would protect it with everything she had. Kaya forced herself to stand on shaking legs and continued toward the border. She had nothing but the clothes on her back. No money, no supplies, no plan. Just a desperate need to put distance between herself and the pack that had witnessed her destruction. The border was marked by ancient stones covered in moss and runes. Kaya crossed into neutral territory and immediately felt the difference. No pack bonds, no collective consciousness, just emptiness and the sound of the wind through pine trees. She made it another 50 feet before her legs gave out completely. The ground was cold and damp against her cheek. Kaya's vision blurred, whether from tears or exhaustion, or the remnants of bond-breaking pain, she couldn't tell. She thought distantly that she should get up, should keep moving, but her body wouldn't cooperate. "Child?" The voice was ancient and crackling, like dry leaves underfoot. "Look at me, child." Kaya managed to turn her head. An old woman stood above her, so elderly her face was a map of wrinkles, her eyes clouded with cataracts. She wore robes that might have been any color once but had faded to gray, and she leaned heavily on a twisted walking stick. "The Oracle," Kaya breathed. Every pack had stories of the wandering Oracle, the seer who appeared at moments of great change. The old woman knelt with surprising grace and placed one weathered hand on Kaya's belly. Her clouded eyes seemed to look through Kaya, beyond her, into something vast and unknowable. "Your child carries the bloodline of kings," the oracle whispered, her voice taking on a resonant quality that raised the hair on Kaya's arms. "And a true king will claim what was meant to be his." "I don't understand," Kaya managed. But the oracle was already standing, already fading back into the shadows between the trees. Her final words drifted back like smoke. "Go north, toward the rising moon. Your destiny awaits at the crossing point." Then she was gone, and Kaya was alone again, with just the cryptic prophecy and the impossible task of surviving until dawn. North, toward the rising moon. Kaya dragged herself upright and began to walk. The neutral territory trading post materialized out of the early morning mist like something from a dream. Kaya had been walking for hours, her feet blistered and bleeding in her impractical shoes, her dress torn and stained with dirt and tree sap. The rising sun painted the wooden buildings in shades of gold and amber, and the scent of fresh bread from the bakery made her stomach clench with hunger. She'd made it. Somehow, running on nothing but desperation and maternal instinct, she'd crossed the neutral zone to the trading post that marked the edge of the Royal Pack's territory. Kaya's vision swam as she stumbled into the main square. People were already up and moving, merchants opening their stalls, guards changing shifts, travelers preparing for the day's journey. A few glanced at her bedraggled appearance with concern or curiosity, but no one approached. She needed water, food, rest. But first, she needed to sit down before she collapsed. Kaya aimed for a bench near the central fountain, but her legs chose that moment to finally give up completely. She felt herself falling, the cobblestones rushing up to meet her, and distantly thought that this was a terrible way to protect her baby. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. The scent hit her first, pine and winter rain, and something wild and powerful that made her wolf suddenly lift its head from where it had been hiding. Then came the sensation of being lifted easily, cradled against a broad chest, surrounded by warmth and strength. "I've got you," a deep voice rumbled above her. "You're safe now." Kaya forced her eyes open and found herself staring into the most striking face she'd ever seen. Sharp features that were almost harsh in their masculinity, a strong jaw covered in dark stubble, and eyes. God's. His eyes. They were a deep forest green that seemed to glow with inner light, and they were looking at her with such intensity it stole what little breath she had left. "Mate." The word came from somewhere deep in her chest, her wolf speaking through her without permission. Horror flooded through Kaya immediately after. No. No, she couldn't do this again. Couldn't survive another rejection. The man holding her went completely still. His eyes widened, his pupils dilating until only a ring of green remained. A shudder ran through his powerful frame, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to a gravelly rumble that vibrated against her cheek. "Mate," he confirmed, and the word sounded like a vow. Around them, the trading post had gone silent. Kaya became aware of people staring, of guards straightening to attention, of a tall blonde man rushing over with his hand on his sword. "Your Majesty," the blonde man said urgently, "we should move inside, now. Your Majesty." The words filtered slowly through Kaya's exhausted mind. She looked back at the man holding her, really looked this time, and recognized the royal insignia embroidered on his black shirt, the natural authority in his bearing, the way every person in the square had either bowed or averted their eyes. "You're the Alpha King," she whispered. "Forest," he corrected gently, beginning to move toward a large building at the edge of the square. "My name is Forest." Kaya's body chose that moment to remind her she'd been walking all night while dealing with bond-breaking trauma and pregnancy exhaustion. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, and she felt herself going limp in the king's arms. "Stay with me," Forrest commanded, his hold on her tightening. "Don't you dare leave me when I just found you." But consciousness was slipping away like water through her fingers. The last thing Kaya registered before the darkness claimed her was the feeling of being carried upstairs, of being laid down on something impossibly soft, and of gentle fingers brushing hair back from her face. "Lucas," she heard Forrest's voice as if from a great distance. "Get the royal physician, now." "Your Majesty, you don't even know who she is. She's my mate." The words were spoken with absolute finality. "And she's hurt. Nothing else matters." Kaya wanted to tell him about the baby, about the rejection, about the fact that she was damaged goods and would only bring him pain. But the words wouldn't come, and the darkness was so inviting. She let it take her. Kaya woke to afternoon sunlight streaming through windows so large they took up an entire wall. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The bed beneath her was enormous, covered in sheets that felt like silk against her skin. The room around her was decorated with understated elegance, dark wood furniture, plush rugs, and tapestries depicting wolves running beneath a full moon. Then memory crashed back, and she sat up with a gasp that made her head spin. "Easy." Forrest appeared in her peripheral vision, rising from a chair he'd pulled next to the bed. "The physician said you're severely dehydrated and exhausted. You need to take it slow." He looked exactly as devastating as she remembered, though he'd changed into fresh clothes, dark pants and a deep green shirt that matched his eyes. Those eyes were fixed on her now with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "Where am I?" Kaya asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "The royal castle. My home." Forrest moved with careful deliberation, like he was afraid of startling her. He poured water from a pitcher on the nightstand and offered it to her. "You collapsed in the trading post this morning. Do you remember?" Kaya nodded and accepted the glass, drinking deeply. The water was cold and pure and tasted better than anything she'd ever had. When she finished, Forrest immediately refilled it. "The physician checked you over while you were unconscious," he said, and something shifted in his expression. "He said you're pregnant. About 3 months." Kaya's hand flew protectively to her belly. "I can explain, and that you recently suffered a bond breaking." Forrest's voice had gone hard, dangerous. "Your mate rejected you." It wasn't a question, but Kaya nodded anyway. Shame heated her cheeks, and she couldn't meet his eyes. Here it came. The moment when her new mate, the Alpha King no less, would decide she wasn't worth the trouble. That a pregnant, rejected wolf had no place in his kingdom. "Look at me." The command in his voice was gentle but undeniable. Kaya forced her gaze up and was shocked to find his expression fierce with protectiveness rather than disgust. "Tell me his name," Forrest said quietly. "Tell me the name of the male who rejected his pregnant mate." "Why?" Kaya whispered. "So I know who to kill." The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather rather than murder, sent a shiver down her spine. But it wasn't fear she felt. It was something warmer, something that made her wolf perk up with interest. "Marcus Thorne," she heard herself say, "Alpha of the Shadow Creek Pack." Forrest's jaw clenched. "I know of him. He requested an audience with me last month to discuss expanding his territory." His eyes flashed with barely contained fury. "I'll be denying that request, and I'll be having a conversation with him about pack law and the proper treatment of mates." "You don't have to," Kaya started. "Yes, I do." Forrest moved closer, and Kaya caught his scent again, that intoxicating mix of pine and winter rain. "You're my mate, Kaya. The moment I saw you, my wolf recognized you. And that means you're under my protection now. No one will ever hurt you again." Tears burned in Kaya's eyes. "You don't even know me." "Then let me." Forrest's expression softened. "Stay here. Let me take care of you. No pressure, no expectations. Just let me prove that not all mates are like him." "I'm pregnant with another male's child," Kaya said, needing him to understand. Marcus called it his biggest regret, his biggest mistake. "Why would you want—" "Stop." Forrest held up one hand and Kaya fell silent. "I'm going to say this once, and I need you to hear me, really hear me." He knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to her eye level. "That baby growing inside you is not a mistake. It's not a regret. Any male who could look at his pregnant mate and say those words isn't worthy of breathing the same air as you." His hand moved slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and came to rest gently on her belly. The touch was reverent, careful, and something in Kaya's chest cracked open at the tenderness of it. "This child is precious," Forrest continued, his voice rough with emotion. "And so are you. I don't care who the biological father is. If you'll have me, if you'll give me the chance, I will be this baby's father in every way that matters. I will protect you both with everything I have." Kaya couldn't stop the tears anymore. They spilled down her cheeks as something she'd thought was broken beyond repair began to cautiously unfurl in her chest. Hope. Fragile and terrifying, but undeniably there. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Forrest's smile was small and sad and knowing. "Because the moon goddess brought you to me for a reason. Because when I look at you, everything in me says mine. Because I've been alone for a very long time, and I think maybe you have too." He wiped away her tears with his thumb, the gesture achingly gentle. "And because I meant what I said. You're safe now. Both of you." Kaya looked into those forest green eyes and saw only sincerity, only truth. Her wolf was already half in love with him, purring at his touch and his scent and his protective words. She was terrified, devastated, still bleeding from Marcus's rejection and the shattered remains of their bond, but she was also a mother, and her baby deserved a chance at happiness, at safety, at a life better than the one she'd barely escaped. Okay, Kaya breathed. Okay, I'll stay. The smile that broke across Forrest's face was like sunrise after the longest night. He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles that sent sparks racing up her arm. You won't regret this, he promised. And looking at him, feeling the mate bond beginning to form between them, stronger and truer than anything she'd ever felt with Marcus, Kaya thought maybe, just maybe, she might actually believe him. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of Kaya's suite, painting everything in jewel tones: sapphire, emerald, ruby. She'd been at the royal castle for 2 weeks now, and she still wasn't used to waking up in a bed larger than her entire bedroom back at Shadow Creek. The silk sheets felt decadent against her skin, the mattress so perfectly comfortable that she actually slept through most nights without the nightmares that had plagued her since the rejection. Most nights, not all. Kaya placed her hand over her belly, feeling the slight curve that had become more pronounced in the days since her arrival. 4 months now. The royal physician, a kind elderly wolf named Dr. Marin, had examined her thoroughly and declared both her and the baby perfectly healthy. The little one was growing right on schedule, and Kaya's body was recovering from the trauma of the bond breaking faster than expected. Dr. Marin credited the new mate bond for that. The one forming between her and Forrest, slow and golden and so different from what she'd had with Marcus that it barely seemed like the same phenomenon. A knock sounded at her door, followed immediately by Forrest's voice. Kaya, are you awake? I have breakfast. Kaya smiled despite herself. Every morning for the past 2 weeks, like clockwork. He never entered without permission, never pushed, never demanded. Just knocked and waited, his patience seemingly infinite. Come in, she called, sitting up and adjusting her nightgown. Another gift from Forrest. This one pale blue and modest, clearly chosen with care rather than seduction in mind. The door opened and Forrest entered carrying a tray laden with food. He'd clearly been up for hours already, dressed in dark pants and a burgundy shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. His dark hair was slightly damp, suggesting a recent shower, and when he smiled at her, Kaya's traitorous heart did a little flip in her chest. Good morning, he said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. I had the kitchen make those cinnamon rolls you liked yesterday, and there's fresh fruit, eggs, bacon, and that herbal tea Dr. Marin recommended for. He gestured vaguely at her stomach, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. For the nausea, Kaya finished, amused by his sudden awkwardness. The Alpha King, ruler of the largest pack territory in the region, blushing over pregnancy symptoms. Thank you, Forrest. You didn't have to bring it yourself. I wanted to. He pulled out the chair for her, waiting until she'd patted over and settled before taking the seat across from her. I like seeing you in the morning, making sure you're okay. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. Kaya busied herself with the tea, breathing in the soothing blend of ginger and mint. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I feel safer here than I've felt in, maybe ever. Something fierce flashed in Forrest's eyes. Good. That's how you should feel. He watched her take a bite of the cinnamon roll, his expression satisfied when she made an involuntary sound of pleasure. I was thinking, if you're feeling up to it, we could walk in the gardens today. The roses are blooming, and there's a fountain I think you'd like. Kaya had been outside only a handful of times since arriving, mostly to see Dr. Marin in the castle's medical wing. The idea of a leisurely walk with Forrest, of sunshine and fresh air and normalcy, sounded wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. I'd like that, she said softly. Forrest's smile could have lit the entire castle. Perfect. I'll come back for you after lunch. Lucas is insisting I actually attend some council meetings today. He rolled his eyes affectionately. Apparently, the kingdom won't run itself. He stood to leave, then hesitated, his gaze dropping to her belly. May I? Kaya's breath caught. She knew what he was asking, the same thing he asked every morning before he left. Permission to acknowledge her pregnancy, to touch, to connect with the life growing inside her that wasn't biologically his, but that he already treated as precious. She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Forrest knelt beside her chair with a grace that shouldn't have been possible for someone so large and powerful. His hand settled gently over her belly, his palm warm through the thin fabric of her nightgown. "Good morning, little one," he murmured, his voice dropping to something intimate and tender. "Your mama is doing so well, getting stronger every day. I hope you know how lucky you are to have her." His thumb traced a small circle, the gesture unconscious and sweet. "I'm going to take care of both of you. I promise." Tears pricked at Kaya's eyes. Every morning he did this. Every morning he spoke to her baby with such reverence, such love, that it chipped away at another piece of the wall she'd built around her heart. Marcus had never touched her belly, had barely looked at it, had called their child a mistake, a regret, a burden. Forrest called it lucky, called her strong, made promises to a baby that wasn't even his. When he stood and pressed a chaste kiss to her forehead before leaving, Kaya let the tears fall. But they weren't tears of pain this time. They were something more complicated, more hopeful, and infinitely more frightening. She was falling for him. Despite her fear, despite her trauma, despite every logical reason to guard her heart. She was falling for the Alpha King who'd caught her when she collapsed and refused to let her fall again. The gardens were even more beautiful than Kaya had imagined. Roses in every color climbed trellises and spilled over stone walls, their scent heavy and sweet in the afternoon air. The fountain Forrest had mentioned was a masterpiece of carved marble. Wolves frozen mid-run, water cascading from their mouths into a crystal-clear pool where koi flashed like living jewels. "My great-grandmother commissioned it," Forrest explained, his hand resting lightly at the small of Kaya's back as they walked. Not pushing, not demanding, just there. A steady presence. She believed wolves should be reminded of their wild nature, even in civilized spaces. "It's gorgeous," Kaya breathed, trailing her fingers in the cool water. One of the koi nibbled curiously at her fingertip, making her laugh. The sound made Forrest's expression soften. "I like hearing you laugh. You should do it more often." "I haven't had much to laugh about lately," Kaya admitted, straightening. The sun felt wonderful on her face, warm and life-giving. The garden was enclosed by high stone walls covered in flowering vines, private and protected. She could almost forget the world outside existed. "I know." Forrest moved to sit on the fountain's edge, patting the space beside him. When Kaya joined him, he continued, "I want to change that if you'll let me. I want you to feel joy here, safety, peace." "You've already given me more than I ever expected," Kaya said honestly. "A place to stay, protection, kindness. You ask permission to enter my room, Forrest. Do you know how rare that is? How much it means?" "It's basic respect." Forrest frowned. "You're not a possession. You're my mate, yes, but you're also your own person. You've been through trauma. I won't add to that by making you feel trapped or pressured." Kaya studied his profile, the strong nose, the sharp jaw, the way his eyes reflected the garden's greenery. "Were you always like this? This patient and gentle?" Something dark flickered across Forrest's face. "No. I learned it the hard way." He was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "I wasn't always alone, Kaya. There was someone before you. A mate." Kaya's stomach dropped. The royal physician had mentioned that Forrest had suffered a great loss years ago, but no one had given her details. What happened? Not today, Forrest said softly, meeting her eyes again. Today is for sunshine and roses and watching you smile. The darkness can wait. He stood and offered his hand. Come on. There's a greenhouse full of tropical plants on the other side of the garden. I think you'll like the orchids. Kaya let him pull her up, let him guide her down paths lined with lavender and sage, let herself exist in this moment of peace. Because he was right. The darkness would come eventually. It always did. But for now, she could pretend she was just a woman walking in a garden with a man who looked at her like she was precious, whose hand fit perfectly around hers, whose presence made her wolf purr with contentment. For now, she could let herself be happy. The throne room doors burst open with a crash that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Kaya froze in the corridor, her hand instinctively going to her belly. She'd been on her way to the library, had passed close to the throne room where Forrest was meeting with his council, when the shouting started. I demand to see her! Marcus's voice unmistakable and furious. You have no right to keep my mate from me. Kaya's blood turned to ice. No, he couldn't be here. He'd rejected her, cast her out, called her baby a mistake. He had no right. Your former mate. Forrest's voice cut through the throne room like a blade, cold and deadly in a way Kaya had never heard from him before. You rejected her, Alpha Thorn. You have no claim to her anymore. She carries my heir, Marcus roared. My child. That gives me every right. Kaya's feet moved without conscious thought, carrying her toward the throne room entrance. Royal guards stood at attention outside, but they didn't stop her as she slipped through the partially open doors. The room inside was massive, dominated by an obsidian throne on a raised dais. Forrest sat there now, every inch the Alpha King, his power radiating outward in waves that made even Kaya's wolf want to bow. Below him, Marcus paced like a caged animal. He looked the same, dark hair, handsome features, the build of a warrior. But where Kaya had once seen strength, she now saw cruelty. Where she'd seen confidence, she now saw arrogance, and she saw fear. Beneath the bluster and the shouting, Marcus was afraid. You called that child your biggest regret, Forrest said, his voice dangerously soft. You told your pregnant mate she was a mistake. You rejected her in front of your entire pack and cast her out to die. And now you dare come to my castle, to my territory, and demand her back? My new chosen mate is barren, Marcus spat. The pack demands an heir. You need nothing. Forrest stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kaya is under my protection now. She is my mate, and that child she carries will be my heir. You have no rights here. You can't just steal another alpha's mate. You rejected her. Forrest's roar shook the windows. You severed the bond. She came to me broken and bleeding because of your cruelty, and you think I'll just hand her back so you can… What? Take her child? The child you didn't want until it became convenient? Marcus's eyes darted around the room, finally landing on Kaya where she stood frozen in the doorway. His expression twisted into something that might have been regret if there was any genuine emotion behind it. Kaya, he said, his voice shifting to something smoother. Baby, I made a mistake. I was angry. I wasn't thinking clearly. Come home. We can fix this. We can be a family. Kaya felt nothing. Where there had once been a mate bond, there was only scar tissue and the new golden thread connecting her to Forrest. Marcus's words slid off her like water off stone. No, she said simply. Marcus's face darkened. Kaya. I said no. Strength she didn't know she possessed flooded through her. You made your choice, Marcus. You called my baby a regret. You rejected me in front of everyone. You humiliated me, hurt me, and threw me away. She placed both hands protectively over her belly. This child isn't yours anymore. Not in any way that matters. You don't get to make that decision. She doesn't have to, Forrest interjected, moving down from the dais with lethal grace. I'm making it for her. You are not welcome in my territory, Alpha Thorn. You have 1 hour to leave before I have you escorted to the border in chains. He stopped directly in front of Marcus, towering over him despite their similar heights through sheer presence alone. And if you ever come near my mate or my child again, I will kill you. The promise hung in the air like a blade. Marcus looked between Forrest and Kaya, his expression cycling through rage, disbelief, and finally calculation. Whatever he saw in their faces made him step back. This isn't over, Marcus said, but the threat was hollow. He was already backing toward the door, already acknowledging defeat. Yes, Kaya said softly. It is. Marcus fled. There was no other word for it. He turned and strode from the throne room with what little dignity he could muster, and Kaya felt nothing but relief as he disappeared from view. Then Forrest was there, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers with desperate concern. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? Say anything to you before. I'm fine, Kaya interrupted, leaning into his touch. You protected me. Again. Always, Forrest promised. I will always protect you. Kaya believed him. That was the terrifying part. She believed every word. The explosion came without warning. One moment Kaya was looking into Forrest's eyes. The next she was on the ground with his body covering hers, the acrid smell of smoke filling her lungs and the sound of screaming echoing through the castle halls. Stay down, Forrest commanded, his body a shield over hers as debris rained down around them. Through the ringing in her ears, Kaya heard shouts, the clash of weapons, the snarls of wolves in combat. They were under attack. And as Forrest pulled her to her feet and began rushing her toward the interior of the castle, guards forming a protective circle around them, Kaya caught a glimpse of movement on the castle walls. Figures in dark clothing, moving with military precision, and leading them, a tall man with silver hair and eyes that gleamed red even from this distance, another Alpha. Someone powerful enough to attack the Alpha King in his own territory. Someone who'd been waiting for exactly the right moment to strike. Forrest's hand tightened around hers as they ran, and Kaya felt the new mate bond between them pulse with his fear. Not for himself, but for her. For their baby. Faster, he urged, practically carrying her now. We need to get you to the safe room. But Kaya couldn't shake the feeling that nowhere was safe anymore. That something much darker than Marcus's petty grievances had found them. That the Oracle's prophecy was coming true in ways none of them had anticipated. And that the real nightmare was only just beginning. The safe room was deep in the castle's lower levels, behind walls 3 feet thick and a door reinforced with steel and magic. Forrest had brought her here immediately after the attack, along with Dr. Marin and a handful of the most trusted guards. Lucas stood outside the door, coordinating the castle's defense, while Forrest remained with Kaya, refusing to leave her side. It was coordinated, Forrest said, pacing the length of the room like a caged wolf. His phone was pressed to his ear, his expression growing darker with each report he received. 3 different entry points, all hit simultaneously. Professional mercenaries, not common rogues. He listened for another moment, then swore viciously. How many casualties? Kaya hugged herself, perched on the edge of a narrow bed. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The baby had been kicking frantically since the explosion, as if sensing her fear. 5 guards wounded, none critical, Forrest finally said, ending the call. The attackers retreated when they couldn't breach the inner defenses. They weren't here to take the castle. They were here to send a message. What kind of message? Kaya asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. Forrest knelt in front of her, taking her trembling hands in his steady ones. That you're vulnerable, that I can't protect you everywhere. His jaw clenched. They waited until Marcus left, until the throne room was in chaos. This was planned, Kaya. Someone wanted to use Marcus's visit as cover for a real attack. Who? I have my suspicions. Forrest's eyes flashed with barely controlled rage. There's an alpha named Silas who's been consolidating power in the Northern Territories. He's made no secret of his ambition to challenge my rule, and recently... He hesitated, then continued. Recently, he's become interested in old prophecies, legends about bloodlines and heirs who could unite or destroy kingdoms. Kaya's blood ran cold. The Oracle. She said something about my child carrying the bloodline of kings. I know. Forrest's grip on her hands tightened. Lucas has been investigating since you arrived. Your maternal bloodline traces back to the legendary Luna Queen Morgana. The line was thought to be extinct. But if it's true, if you carry that blood, then your child? He trailed off, looking at her belly with a mixture of awe and fear. Would be powerful, Kaya finished. Powerful enough to threaten someone like Silas. Powerful enough that he'd want to eliminate the threat before it's born. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and horrible. Kaya placed her hands over her belly, feeling the baby's movements begin to calm as her own panic transformed into something colder, harder. He wants to kill my baby, she said flatly. He'll have to go through me first. Forrest's voice was pure alpha command. And every warrior loyal to me, every ally I've cultivated, every ounce of power I possess. You're staying here in the castle where it's safest. I'm tripling the guard, adding magical wards and you're going to be a target too, Kaya interrupted. If Silas knows about the prophecy, he knows you're protecting me. That makes you an obstacle. Let him try. Forrest's smile was all teeth. I've been Alpha King for 8 years. I didn't get this throne by being weak. Kaya studied his face, the fierce protectiveness, the absolute certainty, the burning determination to keep her and their child safe. And she realized something that made her chest ache. She trusted him. Completely. Despite Marcus's betrayal, despite every reason to guard her heart, she trusted Forrest with her life and the life of her baby. And that was more terrifying than any attack. Come here, she whispered. Forrest moved instantly, settling beside her on the bed and pulling her carefully into his arms. Kaya buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, pine and winter rain and home, and let herself be held. I'm scared, she admitted. I know. Forrest's hand stroked through her hair, the gesture soothing. I'm scared too, but fear means we have something worth protecting. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. And I will protect you, Kaya. Both of you. I swear on my life, on my crown, on everything I am. Nothing will harm you while I have breath in my body. Kaya tilted her head back to look at him. His green eyes burned with intensity, with promise, with something deeper that made her heart race. Why? She asked. Why does this matter so much to you? I know we're mates, but it's more than that. I can feel it. Forrest's expression cracked, revealing a grief so raw it made Kaya's breath catch. Because I've lost this before, he said roughly. Because I know what it's like to fail to protect the people you love. And I can't. I won't. Let it happen again. Kaya's hand came up to cup his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. Tell me, she said softly. Please. Let me understand. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then Forrest closed his eyes, leaning into her touch, and began to speak. Her name was Elena. The explosion that tore through the castle's west wing came at midnight, 3 days after Marcus's confrontation in the throne room. Kaya woke to the sound of shattering glass and Forrest's roar of fury echoing through the corridors. She scrambled out of bed, her heart pounding, hands instinctively protective over her 5-month belly. The door to her suite burst open. But it wasn't Forrest who entered. It was Lucas, his face grim and streaked with soot. "We need to move you now," he said urgently, already scanning the room for threats. "This is a coordinated assault, multiple entry points, professional mercenaries. Forrest is holding the throne room, but—" The window exploded inward. Kaya screamed as figures in black dropped through, moving with predatory grace. Lucas shifted partially, his wolf rising to the surface as he threw himself between Kaya and the attackers. The sound of combat filled the room. Snarls, the crack of breaking furniture, the wet sound of claws meeting flesh. "Run!" Lucas roared, taking down one attacker but immediately facing two more. Kaya ran. Through the door, down the corridor, her bare feet slapping against cold stone. Behind her, she heard more fighting, more screaming. The castle had become a war zone, and she was the prize everyone sought. She made it to the main staircase before rough hands grabbed her from behind. Kaya fought, kicking and clawing, but her attacker was stronger, faster. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose, chemical sweet and sickly. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was Forrest's anguished howl somewhere in the castle, and the golden thread of their mate bond pulling tight with his terror and rage. Forrest felt the exact moment Kaya's consciousness faded. The bond between them went slack, and the sensation nearly brought him to his knees in the middle of combat. He'd been fighting off wave after wave of mercenaries in the throne room, protecting the younger pack members who'd taken shelter there, when her fear had spiked through their connection like a knife to his chest. Now there was nothing. Just empty silence where her presence should be. "Kaya!" His roar shook the castle walls. The wolf inside him surged forward, demanding control, demanding blood, demanding he find their mate and destroy everything that threatened her. "Your Majesty!" one of his warriors called. "They're retreating! They're—" Forrest didn't wait to hear the rest. He shifted mid-stride, his clothes tearing as his wolf form exploded outward. He was larger than any normal wolf, his fur midnight black, his eyes glowing with alpha power that made even his own warriors step back in awe and fear. He ran. Through the castle corridors, following the fading scent of his mate mixed with chemicals and strange wolves. The trail led to a shattered window, down the exterior wall where rope still hung, into the forest beyond the castle grounds. They'd taken her. Someone had invaded his home, his sanctuary, and stolen his pregnant mate while he'd been occupied fighting a diversion. Lucas appeared beside him in wolf form, smaller than Forrest but just as deadly. Blood matted his gray fur, but his eyes were clear and focused. Other warriors joined them, a dozen loyal wolves ready to follow their king into hell itself. Forrest didn't slow down. He ran faster, his powerful legs eating up the distance, his nose locked on Kaya's scent. The bond between them might be muted by whatever they'd drugged her with, but it was still there, still pulling him north and east, toward the mountain territories, toward Silas's lands. Rage gave way to something colder, more dangerous. This wasn't just an attack. This was an abduction, planned and executed with precision. Marcus's visit had been a distraction, the initial assault on the castle another diversion. Everything had been designed to separate Forrest from Kaya long enough to take her, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated how far the Alpha King would go to protect what was his. Forrest's wolf pushed harder, faster, drawing on reserves of power he rarely tapped. The royal bloodline carried magic older than the packs themselves, gifts that manifested only in times of desperate need. His senses sharpened until he could track individual scents across miles. His strength multiplied until trees that blocked his path splintered like kindling. His howl echoed across the kingdom, a summoning call that every pack under his rule would hear and answer. By the time they reached the border of neutral territory, Forrest's force had tripled. Wolves from neighboring packs had heard their king's call and come running, their own alphas leading them. The sight would have been magnificent under other circumstances. Dozens of wolves moving as one coordinated force, their combined power enough to make the earth tremble. But Forrest had eyes only for the trail ahead, for the fortress that rose in the distance like a dark tooth against the mountain, for his mate, somewhere inside those walls, and the child she carried that he'd already claimed as his own. Hold on, he thought desperately, pushing everything he had through the bond. Hold on, Kaya, I'm coming. Kaya woke to the smell of damp stone and burning sage. Her head pounded, her mouth tasted like chemicals, and her whole body ached from being carried roughly for what must have been hours. She tried to move, and discovered her wrists were bound behind her back, secured to a cold metal chair. Ah, you're awake. Excellent. Kaya's vision swam into focus. The room around her was circular, carved from raw stone, with symbols painted on the walls that seemed to writhe in the flickering torchlight. An altar stood at the center, stained dark with what she desperately hoped wasn't blood. And standing before her, wearing an expression of smug satisfaction, was Marcus. You look confused, Marcus said, moving closer. He'd changed from the expensive clothes he'd worn at the castle into simple dark pants and a shirt. Let me explain. You see, when I visited your precious Alpha King, I wasn't there to win you back. I was there to provide a distraction while my new allies planned your extraction. Allies? Kaya's voice came out rough, her throat raw from the drugs or from screaming. She couldn't remember which. Alpha Silas, primarily. Marcus gestured to the shadows, where Kaya now noticed other figures standing. Wolves, all of them, their eyes reflecting torchlight like predators in the dark. He has a vested interest in ensuring that prophecy of yours never comes to pass. A child of legendary bloodlines, raised by the Alpha King? That's a threat to his ambitions. Kaya's hands instinctively tried to move to her belly, but the restraints held firm. My baby has nothing to do with politics. She's innocent. She. Marcus's eyebrows rose. It's a girl. How disappointing. I was hoping for a proper heir. He shook his head, dismissing the thought. No matter. The child's gender is irrelevant to our purposes. Terror spiked through Kaya, cold and sharp. What purposes? You're going to help us break your bond with Forrest, Marcus said casually, as if discussing the weather. There's a ritual. Old magic. Very dark. Very permanent. Once your connection to the Alpha King is severed, he'll lose all claim to you and your child. Then Silas will eliminate the baby. I'll take credit for delivering you both to him, and in return, I'll receive territory and resources to strengthen my own pack. You're insane. Kaya pulled against her restraints, but they didn't budge. Forrest will find me. He'll kill you all. He's chasing shadows across the Western Territories right now, following a false trail. Marcus smiled. By the time he realizes where you really are, the ritual will be complete. Movement at the edge of the room drew Kaya's attention. A woman emerged from the shadows, elderly, hunched, with milky eyes and gnarled hands. Not the oracle from the border, but something else. Something that made Kaya's wolf recoil in instinctive horror. A dark witch, Kaya breathed. Perceptive, the witch rasped, her voice like dry leaves crackling. Yes, child, I will be conducting the ceremony. The Alpha brought me here specifically for this purpose. She moved closer, her clouded eyes somehow seeming to see directly into Kaya's soul. Your bloodline is strong, ancient. This will be painful. The witch began chanting in a language Kaya didn't recognize. The symbols on the walls started to glow with sickly green light. Marcus stepped back, his expression eager and hungry. Kaya felt the magic reach for her like cold fingers, trying to grasp the golden thread that connected her to Forrest, the bond that had been growing stronger every day. that had brought her back from the brink of despair, that represented hope and safety, and a future she dared to imagine. No. The word resonated through Kaya's entire being, not from her conscious mind, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere primal and ancient and absolutely unwilling to surrender. No, you cannot have this. You cannot have us. Heat flooded through Kaya's body, starting in her core where her baby grew and spreading outward like wildfire. The restraints holding her wrists began to smoke. The witch's chanting faltered, her expression shifting from confidence to confusion. What? Marcus started. Kaya's eyes snapped open, and she knew without seeing that they were glowing. Not the normal gold of a wolf's eyes, but pure silver. The color of moonlight, of ancient magic, of a power that predated the packs themselves. The restraints shattered. Kaya rose from the chair in one fluid motion, her hands coming to rest protectively over her belly. Power crackled around her like lightning, silver light that pushed back the witch's sickly green magic. "You will not touch my child," Kaya said, and her voice carried harmonics that made the stone walls vibrate. "You will not break my bond. You will not—" The witch shrieked something in her ancient language and thrust both hands forward. Dark magic shot toward Kaya like spears. Kaya didn't think. She simply reacted. Silver light exploded from her hands, meeting the dark magic in midair. The two forces collided with a sound like thunder, and the witch was thrown backward, her body hitting the stone wall with a sickening crack. Marcus shifted, his wolf form erupting forward with murderous intent. But Kaya was faster. Power she didn't understand, but somehow knew how to use, flowed through her like instinct. She sidestepped his attack, grabbed his fur as he passed, and used his own momentum to slam him into the altar. The other wolves in the room moved as one, circling her with predatory intent. Kaya could feel her baby kicking frantically, could feel her own strength beginning to wane from the sudden expenditure of power. She'd bought herself time, but not much. Then the door exploded inward. Forrest stood in the entrance, his human form streaked with blood and dirt, his eyes wild with fury and fear. Behind him, Lucas and dozens of other wolves flooded into the ritual chamber. "Kaya!" Forrest's roar shook the room. Kaya's silver eyes met his green ones across the space. "I'm all right," she said, though her legs were beginning to shake. Marcus chose that moment to rise from where he'd fallen, his wolf form battered but still dangerous. He lunged at Kaya's unprotected back. Forrest moved with speed that shouldn't have been possible, covering the distance between them in a heartbeat. He intercepted Marcus mid-leap, both wolves crashing to the ground in a tangle of fur and fangs and fury. The fight was brutal and brief. Forrest's power as Alpha King, amplified by rage and fear and desperate love, overwhelmed Marcus completely. Within seconds, Forrest had his jaws locked around Marcus's throat, one bite away from ending him permanently. "Forrest, stop!" Kaya's voice cut through the violence. "Don't kill him. Not like this." Forrest's wolf eyes found hers, questioning. She could feel his desire for vengeance through their bond, his need to destroy the male who'd hurt her, threatened her, plotted against their child. "He's not worth it," Kaya said softly, moving closer despite the danger. "He's not worth the darkness it would bring to your soul." For a long moment, the outcome balanced on a knife's edge. Then Forrest released Marcus, who shifted back to human form and lay gasping on the stone floor, his throat bruised but not broken. "Lucas," Forrest said, his voice rough with barely controlled violence. "Chain him and find Silas. He's here somewhere, and he's going to answer for this." As if summoned by his name, Silas appeared. Not from the door, but from behind a concealed entrance in the far wall. He was tall and powerfully built, with silver hair and red eyes that marked him as something other, something that had touched dark magic and been changed by it. How touching, Silas said, his voice smooth and mocking. The Alpha King chooses mercy. How very weak. Weak. Forrest moved to place himself between Silas and Kaia. I'll show you weak. You'll show me nothing. Silas raised one hand, and the symbols on the walls blazed back to life. This fortress has been prepared for months. Every stone is carved with binding runes, every corridor a channel for dark magic. You're in my territory now, Alpha King, and here, your power means nothing. The magic surged upward, wrapping around Forrest like chains. He struggled against it, his alpha power flaring, but the bindings held. Forrest! Kaia rushed forward, but Lucas caught her arm. Your Majesty, you're too weak, Lucas said urgently. The baby is exactly why I have to do this, Kaia interrupted. She could feel the silver power stirring inside her again, responding to Forrest's danger, to the threat against their family. Let me go, Lucas. Trust me. Something in her tone made Lucas release her. Kaia walked forward, her steps steady despite her exhaustion, until she stood beside Forrest. She placed one hand on his arm, and the golden thread of their mate bond suddenly blazed with light. What? Silas started. The power that exploded from Kaia and Forrest together was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. Silver and gold, moonlight and sunlight, ancient bloodline and royal magic combining into something new and unstoppable. The binding runes shattered. The dark magic recoiled. And Silas, for the first time since entering the room, looked afraid. You wanted to know about the prophecy? Kaia said, her voice resonating with power. Let me show you. She and Forrest moved as one, their bond amplifying their individual strengths into something greater than the sum of its parts. Forrest's alpha command rolled outward. Not just a physical force, but a psychic wave that made every wolf in the fortress acknowledge his dominance. Kaia's silver magic wrapped around it, enhancing it, spreading it beyond what should have been possible. Silas tried to fight, tried to call up more dark magic, more binding spells, but he was alone, his power stolen from external sources rather than earned through birthright. Against the combined might of true mates with legendary bloodlines, he never stood a chance. The battle lasted less than a minute. When it was over, Silas knelt on the stone floor, his red eyes dimmed, his body held immobile by silver chains of pure magical energy that Kaia had somehow manifested. The prophecy. A familiar crackling voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. The oracle stood there, her milky eyes seeing everything, her ancient presence commanding attention despite her frail appearance. The child of legends, protected by the true king, she said, moving into the room with slow, deliberate steps. United in love, unbreakable in purpose, the bloodline is restored and a new era begins. She stopped in front of Kaia, placing one gnarled hand gently on her belly. Your daughter will be born under the full moon, healthy and whole. She will bridge the old ways and the new, and her parents' bond will show all wolves that true strength comes not from domination, but from partnership. Kaia felt tears streaming down her face. It's real. All of it is real. It always was, child. The oracle smiled, the expression transforming her weathered face. You doubted yourself, but the magic in your blood never wavered. You were always meant to be here, with him, creating something beautiful from the ashes of your pain. Forrest's arm came around Kaia's shoulders, pulling her carefully against his side. She could feel his heart racing, could sense his overwhelming relief and love and protective fury still simmering beneath the surface. What happens now? Forrest asked the oracle. Now? The old woman chuckled. Now you take your mate home, Alpha King. You prepare for your daughter's birth. You strip this fool of his alpha title. She gestured to Marcus, who was being held by 3 of Forrest's warriors. And you imprison this one. A nod toward Silas, where his dark magic can never touch innocent lives again. Her clouded eyes somehow met Forrest's directly. And you love her, as you were always meant to. The rest will follow. Lucas appeared at Forrest's elbow. Your Majesty, we've secured the fortress. There was a traitor on your council, Councilman Raymond. We found correspondence linking him to Silas. He's been arrested. Good. Forrest's voice was cold. He'll stand trial with the others. He looked down at Kaya, his expression softening. Can you walk? Or should I carry you? Kaya almost laughed at the question. She'd just manifested ancient magical powers, fought off a dark witch, and helped defeat a would-be usurper. But her legs were indeed shaking, her body exhausted from the ordeal, and carrying Forrest's child made everything harder. Carry me, she admitted. Please. Forrest gathered her into his arms as gently as if she were made of glass. The silver light that had surrounded her was fading now, retreating back into whatever deep reservoir of power it had emerged from. She felt achingly human again, vulnerable and tired, and so grateful to be alive that it hurt. I've got you, Forrest murmured against her hair as he began walking toward the exit, his warriors forming a protective circle around them. Always, Kaya, I've got you. Behind them, Marcus was being dragged away in chains, his face twisted with impotent rage. Silas was secured with both physical restraints and magical bindings, his threat finally neutralized. The Dark Witch had fled during the chaos, but Lucas assured Forrest they'd find her. The prophecy was fulfilled, the danger was ended. And as they emerged from the fortress into the cool mountain air, Kaya looked up at the full moon overhead and felt, for the first time since Marcus's rejection, that everything might actually be okay. Better than okay. It might be exactly as it was always meant to be.